Middlesbrough could be closing in on a deal that has been 3.5 years in the making. Of course, we are talking about this fella, Ryan Giles. Who else would we be talking about? The left back at Hull City is a player who has been on Middlesbrough's radar for a long, long time, ever since the summer of 2022 when he first arrived at the club on loan. Since then, he did wonders for us during his loan spell with the club. And since then, he's been linked with us just about every transfer window going in the time since then. So what's going on with Ryan Giles? Are Middlesbrough interested in him? You'll have to wait until later in the video to find out the truth about what's going on with those links. But first, I just want to do a quick recap over why Middlesbrough fans were so enthusiastic about his time at the club. So Giles joined on loan from Wolverhampton Wanderers in the summer of 2022. He spent a full season on loan with Middlesbrough, working under Michael Carrick, and it was just an absolutely outstanding campaign from start to finish. Middlesbrough were playing some swashbuckling attacking football. It was a team that included the likes of Chuba Akpom, included Cameron Archer in the second half of the season, Aaron Ramsey, players like that. So it was a really, really exciting team, and Ryan Giles was a massive part of that. He played at left back. He was someone who was, yes, a left back by position, but technically he was playing much further up the field. He was almost like a left winger, really. He was someone who was playing as a left wing back / left winger. He was someone who was no stranger to getting beyond the halfway line and pushing forward. He was someone who's really, really important to the balance of Middlesbrough's play. With that season, it was primarily Riley McGree who was playing on the left side of that midfield. As we know, people who follow Middlesbrough quite closely, Riley McGree is someone who does like to drift in field, is maybe more natural in those kind of number 10 sorts of positions. It was just a setup which complemented Middlesbrough so well. It meant that Riley McGree could play his natural game and drift into those positions and drop into those pockets of space to do what he can do. But it also meant that Middlesbrough weren't losing their width. And Ryan Giles was someone who was perfect for exploiting that. He loved to get chalk on his boots, as the old cliche was. He'd stay wide. He'd whip balls into the penalty area, and him and Akpom were just a lethal combination over the course of that campaign. You can see there in terms of these numbers, 48 appearances he made for Middlesbrough. 46 of those came in the starting lineup and 12 assists over the course of the campaign, which is just absolutely incredible for someone who was technically a defender. So it was a brilliant season for him. He was a player that Middlesbrough wanted to sign in the summer of 2023 following the end of his loan. I think Middlesbrough were very, very close to being able to do so, but ultimately he ended up going on to join Luton Town, who'd just been promoted. Now, things haven't really gone exactly to plan for Giles since he left Middlesbrough. Yes, the dream of playing in the Premier League was there for all to see. Personally, I don't think you can envy him that. He's done so well in the Championship. So well that he had justified the opportunity to step up to the Premier League and see whether he could make that step, but it just didn't really work out for him at Luton. I think for me, I thought the Luton were going to be ready-made for him. They do play with flying wing backs, so Ryan Giles seemed like a perfect fit, but he just couldn't shift Alfie Doughty, who was playing on that left side for them. The hope was that those two would be competing for that place, but ultimately it ended up being Doughty who held on to the role, became a really key player for Luton during that campaign. I know they got relegated, but they put in a really spirited battle. Alfie Doughty was probably one of their players of the season, in truth. And for Giles, it was just a really tricky time. So it got to January in that season. He was allowed to go out on loan. He joined Hull City on loan for the second half of last season. That was a loan deal with a £4 million option to join the club permanently. Hull took that, so he signed for the club permanently during the summer just gone in 2024. And this season, it's just been another sort of really quite frustrating season for him. It has got a little bit better more recently. Since Hull's new boss came in, Ryan Giles has been a slightly more regularly used player in that time. So he has been slightly more important for Hull, I guess, but it's still a far cry from the Ryan Giles that we saw on loan with Middlesbrough. You can see from the numbers there, 18 appearances, 13 starts, 9 games as an unused sub, no goals, no assists. It's been quite frustrating for him, really. As Middlesbrough fans know, he is someone who likes to get forward, someone who likes to get balls into the box, and they're just really not playing to his strengths at the moment, which is frustrating for him. But ultimately, it's a problem that Hull are having to deal with. The 23rd in the table, they are battling relegation, and perhaps it's just not the perfect kind of situation for someone like Ryan Giles, who prefers playing in a team who are moving forward and attacking well. So his situation is a really interesting one. Middlesbrough have been watching him for a long time. They've been keeping track of him every transfer window. It seems like there's been reports every single time linking Ryan Giles with a potential return to Middlesbrough. And just in the last few days, I spoke to Craig Johns at Teesside Live. I asked him about his links with Ryan Giles to see whether there was any possibility at that point of Middlesbrough being able to make a move for him in this January transfer window. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, never say never. Baz for the whole Daily Mail is obviously a colleague of mine, and he's right. You know, Middlesbrough will always, certainly while Michael Carrick's in charge, will always like Ryan Giles. I think he proved in his loan spell here that he was tailor-made to the kind of ideal way that Michael Carrick wants his team to set out. And I appreciate, you know, he's kind of detractors, if you will, point to his defensive limitations, but you know, Michael Carrick always had a thing that he spoke about, and it was, you know, emphasize your strengths, hide your weaknesses. And in the way that Boro played, you know, kind of the right back at the time, Tommy Smith, would come across, create a three-man defence. The left-sided winger, Riley McGree, would come inside, or Aaron Ramsey in the second half of the season quite often come inside and kind of overload the middle of the park, and that just created all that space down the left, which Ryan Giles exploited perfectly. And as you say, whether Bangura has always felt like the kind of most natural replacement to Giles, but unfortunately just hasn't been able to have a run of fitness to kind of prove that. Engels never looked quite comfortable enough in attacking a left wing, and Borges, I think he's had more success in recent weeks in inverting and creating space for Bergzog on the left wing. I think that's worked quite well in recent games. But again, as you see, I think both Engel and Borges, at best, you could call them kind of steady players, 6, 7 out of 10 every week. Always prone to a 4 or 5 out of 10. Now and then, but you know, never. Ryan Giles was a match winner on his day. The week combined with Chuba Akpom, sorry. You know, he changed games for Boro, and I don't think any of Boro's current left back options are that. I think the issue there, much like the summer, is that Hull are in a position where they wouldn't want to be seen to lose Ryan Giles, particularly to a championship rival. I think they had to lose a few key players in the summer, albeit the Premier League clubs. And you know, there were strong negotiations in the summer between both clubs, and at one point it looked like a deal was quite close to being done. But I think things just weren't going well in terms of Hull City's recruitment, and their owner basically said, you know, we have to pull the plug on this. This will not look good if we if we sell Ryan Giles to a rival. At that point, Hull still wanted to be a promotion rival. Obviously, their season hasn't quite panned out that way, but you know, they were well aware of kind of how that would look to supporters and pulled the plug on it. And you know, I think Boro, as I say, will always have an interest in Ryan Giles while Michael Carrick's at this club and wants to play in the way that he wants to play, because he was tailor-made to it. I think the issue is the price that Hull would want, particularly now they've got a new manager and Ryan Giles seems to be back in his plans, in his thoughts. I know he only came on at half time against Boro, but he'd missed the game before that due to injury, so that was probably the reason for that. I think Hull would just ultimately want too much, as they ultimately did in the summer. The big thing around negotiations before it was eventually pulled was the price that Hull wanted Middlesbrough to play. And I think from Middlesbrough's perspective, while they know how good Ryan Giles is, he's ultimately never done it in the Premier League. So do you want to pay? I think Hull paid about 4 million and wanted to kind of recoup that in the summer in selling him. Middlesbrough's kind of perspective on that was, do you want to pay £4 million for a player who is unlikely to be able to step up with you to the Premier League? He might help you get there, but it's only a might. He didn't ultimately in his season when he was here. It's those kind of risks that you're always looking at, and do you take the risk, do you not? And they decided to go on Borges, and I'd be very, very surprised if that situation changed significantly enough for Giles to be a viable option this month.
So that chat with Craig Johns was a few days ago now. The talk of a potential move for Ryan Giles and the potential interest is there. That's something that that hasn't changed, but it does seem to have kicked on a little bit in the time since that conversation. And reports came out in the Northern Echo on Tuesday the 14th. Written by Dom Shaw, who's very, very reliable when it comes to Middlesbrough news. He doesn't really get much wrong. And he was reporting that the Middlesbrough had, in fact, held preliminary talks with Hull City over a potential deal for Ryan Giles. That's something which was a big step in the right direction from just that interest which we've seen in previous windows. He reported that Hull are keen to offload the player after signing him for £4 million in the summer. As I said, things just haven't really worked out for him at Hull, and for Hull, I think it is just kind of a case of cutting their cloth and freeing up a little bit of money to bring in the players that they ultimately need to try and avoid relegation. It seems that Ryan Giles is someone who they see as dispensable, and I guess given Middlesbrough's interest, it's someone who they could potentially get a little bit of money for. Michael Carrick remains an admirer. That's no surprise given just how well he performed during that season at Middlesbrough. The assists that he provided were just brilliant. It was such a massive contribution to the team. And you've got to say that Middlesbrough have struggled to replace Ryan Giles. I know that a lot of people get kind of sick about talking about it, but left back has been a real kind of problem position since then. We signed Lucas Engel and Alex Bangura. That summer that Giles left to go to Luton. Both of those players were expected to compete and ultimately try and replicate what Giles was doing, but it just didn't really work out. Lucas Engel, a little bit of a steady Eddie, I guess, in terms of his performances. I don't think he does much wrong, you could say. But he's just he's a decent enough player, but he's not the kind of dynamic player that Ryan Giles was. I think Alex Bangura, I think he was more expected to be the natural successor for Giles. He is someone who was he's pacey, he's powerful. He is someone who likes to get forward and join up with the attack. But injury problems have just meant that he's had no real opportunity to show what he can sort of do or to really kind of nail down that spot on a permanent basis. He's missed the entirety of this season so far through injury, which is really frustrating for him, but really frustrating for supporters as well, who I think are really quite excited about his talent. Hopefully they get to see it at some point in the future. But in the summer just gone, Middlesbrough also brought in Neto Borges. I think Michael Carrick knew that left back was a bit of a trouble position, and so he came in. And I think he's been an improvement. I think we've seen. I think he's a bit of an upgrade on Lucas Engel, but again, he is the sort of player who it just maybe just doesn't offer quite as much as what Ryan Giles did in that position. I think what we saw was some fairly steady performances in the first half of the season from Neto Borges. More recently, we've seen a slight tactical tweak where he's started off in a left back position and then kind of drifted into a central midfield, almost like a kind of inverted left back type position. We've seen it a lot in the Premier League in particular. I know that Pep Guardiola does it quite often. We've seen people like Rico Lewis or Josko Gvardiol or previously like Cancelo, people who would like drop into those little spaces inside. Liverpool have done it with Trent Alexander-Arnold, getting these kind of technical players to not just be an out-and-out right back, but dropping into positions where they can pick up the ball a little bit more and add a little bit of an overload into those central areas. Neto Borges has done that for Middlesbrough. It has been effective to a point, but I think ultimately, given the system that Middlesbrough play, given what I was saying before about how Middlesbrough were able to get the best out of Riley McGree as well back in that season in 2022 to 23. I think having someone like Giles who can effectively be almost a left winger from left back would be something that would be a massive boost. And so it's no surprise really that Michael Carrick remains an admirer of him. The report also says that Hull will need to be realistic with regards to the asking price. They signed him for £4 million in the summer, but his form just hasn't been at it over the last couple of months. So there's no way that Hull are going to be able to realistically recoup a fee of £4 million or even ask for any more of that. They're certainly not going to be able to make a profit on him, because I think it's safe to say that Ryan Giles' stock has fallen during the last 12 to 18 months. I think when he was at Middlesbrough, it was someone who was seen as a really, really top level talent. He went to Luton, didn't quite work out there. It hasn't really worked out at Hull, so his stock has fallen. But I think crucially for Giles and for Middlesbrough, we have seen firsthand just how well he can do in Michael Carrick's system, which is why Middlesbrough remain interested. So I think there is an argument that Hull will need to be realistic with their asking price. I don't know exactly what that fee would be. It's not going to be like a super cheap signing. Potentially, it could be one that's like maybe 2 or 3 million, something like that. Would probably seem fair given just how highly Middlesbrough rate him, and Hull will want to get a reasonable fee for him. So that'll be interesting to watch. And the other crucial thing that that Dom reported in the Northern Echo was that no other club is currently interested. So often what happens with these kind of situations is that if there are multiple clubs, the selling club is basically rubbing their hands together because they're able to almost effectively start a bit of a bidding war. They can play the clubs off against each other, try and drive up the price as much as possible, and ultimately get the maximum fee in return. But as it stands at the moment, it's reported that no one else is interested in Ryan Giles. It would only be Middlesbrough who were in the race. It would just solely be between Middlesbrough and Hull City to try and thrash out a deal, see what could potentially be done. To see whether it is something that could potentially come to fruition. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch over the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks. I feel like we spend our life talking about Ryan Giles, but perhaps this is going to be the month where he actually arrives at Middlesbrough, which is going to be very, very interesting to see whether the deal gets done. Left back wasn't a position that many expected Middlesbrough to pursue during the January transfer window, but I think given the problems that we've had at left back and the fact that no one's really sort of filled that void since he left, I think Ryan Giles is just that sort of maybe the one who got away a little bit. There's one where Middlesbrough really just feel like he could be that missing piece of the jigsaw by coming in at left back, even though left back isn't really a priority. So I want to hear from you with regards to Ryan Giles. I know that everyone has an opinion on him because, as I said at the start of this, we've spent about 3.5 years talking about him since he arrived on loan for the first time. So let me know what you think about the links with Ryan Giles. Would you like to see him come back to Middlesbrough? Would he be a good signing for the club? Drop into the comments below. Let me know what you think of the potential arrival of Ryan Giles and the interest in him this month. And while you're at it, please do hit subscribe as well, because there's going to be plenty more videos coming over the coming weeks. Thanks a lot.